Good afternoon, Facebook and YouTube viewers. I am Rebecca Susmarski, the Register Mail government reporter, and I am here today with Illinois gubernatorial candidate Chris Kennedy. And thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks, Rebecca. Great to be here.
It seems like it was a long drive, huh?
At this point, I'm used to long drives. I've been down to Carbondale and back the same day from Chicago. Did it last Friday, and a foot of snow fell while we were leaving Chicago and returning. So this is a short drive compared to most of them.
A lot of determination to get on through. So
I love it all. So good to be all over the state.
Good. And I did want to start out, I definitely want to get into some policy questions,
Sure.
Particularly economic. But before I do, I am curious because you are the only candidate in this race that comes from an established political family. What are some of the pressures of that, whether it was growing up in the political family or now in your career? What do you think are some expectations people might have?
I don't know about other people, but I can tell you when I told my mother, I called her and to let her know that I was thinking about running for governor, and when I decided to run, I called my mother, Ethel Kennedy, and I said, Mother, I'm going to run for governor of Illinois. And her response was, well, what took you so long? So I think she's very comfortable with it, as are my brothers and sisters, all of whom who have been very helpful in the effort. I'd say there's more pressure on them to help me than there was pressure from them to get me to run. And I'm lucky to have a big family. My grandmother, Rose Kennedy, she was the mother of President Kennedy, and she was once asked, what's the trick to having a successful political career? And they asked her that because not only was she the mother of the president, but she was the daughter of the first American-born Irish Catholic mayor of Boston. And she waited about half a beat, and she said, oh, the trick, well, to be successful in politics, you got to start with a big family. And it was sort of a funny line, but I found that it's true. It's helpful to have lots of siblings to cover this state, and they've all been out to help.
And kind of going off that too, there's been a lot of talk in the race of, particularly when relating to Pritzker versus Rauner in terms of money in politics, but obviously your family is worth billions, and like you say, you have a lot of connections in the family. Why should voters vote for you then, believe that you represent them?
Why should voters think that I represent them? I think that's a great question, and they have a choice in this election. This year, everybody has a choice. And I think that choice is really between the status quo and change. If you like the way Illinois is today, if you think we're on the right track, if you think it's a good idea to have a handful of elected officials led by Speaker Madigan control the outcome of government, if you like the economy that we have, then you should vote for J.B. Pritzker, who was brought in to protect that status quo, or three-term incumbent Daniel Biss, who's been part of that system for years. If you like that, that's where you should go. If you don't like it, if you want change, if you think we should have a democracy and not an auction for an election, if you think we elected a governor, not a king, then come with me, help out, return democracy to our state.
So how would you differ that and bring?
Yeah, I think it's funny for people. They think it's a strange thing for a member of the Kennedy family to be running against the establishment, for a member of the Kennedy family to take on the Democratic Party, for a member of the Kennedy family to go after Speaker Madigan. I can understand that because our name's been associated with the establishment and the Democratic Party for years. But when President Kennedy ran for president in 1960, his great opposition wasn't Richard Nixon in the general election. His great opposition was the Democratic Party during the primaries. They said to him, please don't run, we don't want you. You're a Roman Catholic and you'll take down the entire ticket. Then they said, please don't run, we don't want you. You're too young, you're from the wrong generation, and we don't want you, you'll take down the entire ticket. But he battled them back, and then he went on to win in the general election. When my father, Bobby Kennedy, ran for president in 1968, he took on the sitting president of the United States, Lyndon Johnson, who was, in effect, the head of the Democratic Party. He took on Johnson because he felt Johnson was sending young people, the next generation, to Vietnam to die in the jungles there in a war that no one understood, and he felt there was no reason for America to be there. When Ted Kennedy, my uncle, ran for president in 1980, he took on Jimmy Carter, in effect, the president of the United States and the head of the Democratic Party, because Jimmy Carter had sided with the big banks and corporations who were being creamed by the inflation that was ravishing the country at the time. And their solution was to raise interest rates, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22%, with the idea that if enough people lost their homes, enough people lost their cars, enough people lost their jobs, that we could preserve the economy for the big banks and corporations. And Ted Kennedy thought that was wrong. That's not what the Democratic Party stood for. We should stand for the people who were losing their houses, losing their jobs, losing their cars. And so he took on the president, the head of the party. That's who the Kennedys have always been, the person that I've become in this race, which is an outsider willing to take on the Democratic Party.
And you have become known for calling him out in terms of being a property tax appeals lawyer and also serving as Speaker of the House. If you are elected governor, how will you combat that and then work with him to get things done?
Sure. I think it's important. I think all of us want a functioning government. We're sick of the fights and the warfare in Springfield, a government system that's characterized by paralysis and where we went a couple of years without a budget. It doesn't have to be like that. We should find a way to get along, but the notion that our elected officials can have outside jobs that are, well, a conflict of interest, or they can have outside jobs that are adverse to the interest of the body that they were elected to serve, I don't think we should allow them to do that. I don't think elected officials should have outside jobs as property tax appeals lawyers, because property taxes is how we fund our government, and if they're on both sides of that, well, then they have a conflict of interest. Worse than that is that they're preventing us from moving to a system of an income tax-based system for funding our schools. Schools are critical to the future of our state, and in Illinois we're underfunding our schools. We should fund our schools with an income tax at the state level and not through local property taxes. But the Speaker and others who have jobs as property tax appeals lawyers are stopping us from doing that. I don't think what the Speaker is doing is illegal, but I think that being a property tax appeals lawyer and a state rep should be illegal. We shouldn't allow them to do that.
And how, if you are elected, then will you work with Madigan if he is elected Speaker of the House?
Great question. So I'm a Democrat, but I'm a Kennedy Democrat. I'm particularly a Ted Kennedy Democrat. Ted Kennedy, my uncle, was the most important man in my life growing up and a great example to me. Teddy, he had his fingerprints on every great piece of legislation from 1962 to 2009. He was able to play such an incredible leadership role in the United States Senate, and in fact the entire Congress, because he always worked at having friendships across the aisle with people who might be considered his enemies. He never took politics personally. If somebody went on the Senate floor and railed against Ted Kennedy and the Democrats, he didn't take it personally. He'd put his arm around them in the cloakroom afterward and tell them they gave a terrible speech and laugh at them and have a good time, and he would work with them. And that's a great contrast to what's happened in our state now. Governor Rauner's made no effort to reach across the aisle to the Democrats, and frankly, he's made very little effort to reach into his own party, to have dinner or lunch with state reps and state senators, to get to know mayors, to reach out to our federal delegation like our United States senators and congressmen. And as a result, we now rank like 48th out of 50 states in terms of what we send to the federal government and what we get back in taxes and spending in Illinois from the federal government, because in part the governor of our state hasn't been working those phones to help bring back the bacon from Washington.